about what our real job is as a dad. Now, some people think that their job as a dad is to just be their kid's friend. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't be friendly with your kids. Of course you can be your friend, but your job as a dad is more than just being a friend. In fact, sometimes you may have to do things that don't seem like you would do with much friends, because your real job as a dad is to help your children be successful. Now, somebody told me this analogy. Imagine you were in a dark cave and you're feeling along the wall of this dark cave, zero light in the cave. And as you feel along the wall of this cave, there's a point where the wall crumbles. Would you feel more secure or less secure when that wall crumbled inside the cave? My guess is you would probably feel less secure. Now, I use this analogy because the boundaries that we put up for our children are good. In fact, part of the reason we're dads is to put up firm boundaries for our kids. Let me give you an example. Is it loving to let your child go play in the street? The answer is, I don't think so. Your child play in the street or run out in the street, or say 2 or 3 years old, that car, right? And so you could put up a boundary that says, you know what, I'm not going to let you run in the street. And you can hold that boundary firm. Now, some people say, well, I mean, is that loving? That's the question. And the answer is yes, it is loving, because otherwise your child could have the experience of being hit by a car, which you don't want them to have, right? Let me give you another example. Is it loving to let your kids steal from the store? Well, if you don't teach them the correct principle about not stealing and having some sort of discipline around that, they may have the opportunity to have society teach them that that's not okay and go to jail. So letting your kids learn when they're young consequences and principles and teaching them when they're young is actually really loving. Now, there's 2 messages that we need to send our children. The first one is, I love you unconditionally. Meaning, I love you no matter what. There's nothing you could do that would make it so that I don't love you. But at the same time, the second message is, because I've been around a few years longer than you have, I know a few things. And I know that if you align with principles, you're going to get better consequences than if you don't align with principles. In other words, if you decide you want to lie, cheat, and steal and break the principle of honesty, you won't have people trust you. So I need to teach you to be honest and true and not lie, cheat, and steal, because I want you to have the experience of having people trust you. Now, honesty is a principle that's as real as gravity. You can either align with it or you can ignore it. And it works everywhere. I'm going to give you a business example. Okay, so one of the things that I've done in my career is sales. And one time I was selling something online. Somebody called me up. In fact, I was working for this company that had hundreds of things for sale online. And my job was to sell. Now, I was on straight commission, which means I didn't get paid unless somebody bought a product from me. Now, somebody called up on the phone, and my job was to answer the phone, and they said, hey, I'm thinking about buying this one particular product. And then they asked me a really interesting question. They said, would you buy it from you? Now, the truth was, I wouldn't. I wouldn't buy it from me. And the reason was I knew you could get it cheaper on Amazon. Now I had a choice. I could either align with the principle of honesty, which is kind of like building a hydroelectric dam, like we talked about in the first section, or building a ski resort, or I could ignore it, which is kind of like falling off a cliff. Luckily, at this point, I decided to align, and I just told the person, I said, don't buy it from us. Just go on Amazon and get it cheaper. You'll save yourself some money. Now, some of you, if any of you are in sales, any dads here who are listening here in sales, you might think I'm crazy. Like, didn't you want to make some money? The answer is, of course I did. But the principle is more important than how I'm feeling at the moment. And that's key. The principle is more important than how you're feeling. Here's the interesting thing, though. When I aligned with that principle, here's what happened on that call. He did not buy that from me. But here's what happened that was interesting. By the end of that call, he made a massive order of something else that was dozens of times bigger. Dozens of times. So I traded giving myself for something that was really big. And that's what happens in life when you align with principle. So what I want to talk about is these principles. But let's go back. We need to be able to set boundaries. Right now we're talking about boundaries. When our children come to us and say, hey, I want to do something that's against principles, one of the best things we can do is talk through the consequences of like why we want to align with the principles so they understand the real reason why. Why is it that I want you not to steal a candy bar from the store? Well, it's because the store owner had to work hard to earn the money to get that candy bar, and he's trying to support his family. And if you take it, it takes money from his family. And besides that, there's consequences in society for doing that. I mean, you could end up going to jail for making that decision. So I want you to learn the reason why. I want to teach the reason why I'm putting the boundary up. And then I want to make sure if let's just say that my child did steal a candy bar from the grocery store. And let's just say that I had an appointment that I needed to get to. Well, I have a choice. I could say to my child, you know what? Dad's in a real hurry. You shouldn't do that. But the best thing to do would be to take the time to walk the candy bar back in, have the child give it back to him, tell him, admit to the guy that the child did, have him tell the store owner that he shouldn't have stolen, and have the child be a little bit embarrassed, and maybe even have to work to earn the money to pay for it or something like that, so that the child had a real consequence. Now, in the short run, that's kind of painful for you. It's kind of painful because you might be late to your appointment. In the short run, it's embarrassing for you because your child did it. In the short run, your child might be embarrassed. But in the long run, just like with any principle, the consequences are really, really good. In other words, your child now learns not to steal. Your child now learns that the reasons why. And may even, if you let it go far enough down the road, it's possible that your child could end up being in jail and have court fees and attorney's fees and all kinds of things because you didn't take the time when they were young to teach them. So the cost to society could be prison, court, attorneys, counseling, some sort of psychological rehab. All of these are very, very costly. But if you took that time, even though it might make you late to your appointment, and you took the time to teach your child why we shouldn't steal, the consequences are, it's harder in the short run, but in the long run, the consequences are really, really good. Now, there was a wise man, I think it was Neil Maxwell, and he said something like this. I'm probably misquoting, but he said something like this. If we don't fix marriages and families, everything else we do will be like straightening deck chairs on the Titanic. Did you hear that? In other words, the root of the problems we see in our societies, it's so important that you as a dad realize what a huge impact you have. If we don't fix the way we parent, if we don't fix the way we're dads, and how we teach our children principles, everything else we do will be like straining deck chairs on the Titanic. In other words, the system isn't going to solve it. A lot of the problems that we're seeing in the world today are because dads didn't step up. Dads like you, who are awesome, who can do a good thing, didn't step up. Now, I believe that everyone watching this video, I believe that you can be a great dad. Whether you're a dad or not, whether you feel like you're given the short end of the stick, you can learn to be a great dad. I have faith that you can. The very fact that you're watching this course is a sign that you're trying to be a good dad. And if you keep going, you'll be a great dad. So this is what I want you to know. If I teach my kid not to steal and I'm late for my appointment and it's a little embarrassing for me, the short-term hard way is the long-term easy way. Did you hear that? But the short-term easy way is the long-term hard way. And so sometimes we've got to do the hard thing in the moment that's aligned with principles so that in the long run, those principles are pushing us on. In other words, when we're aligning with principles, it's almost like gravity is pushing you forward, like a hydroelectric dam, kind of like we talked about at the beginning of the course. But if we're ignoring principles, it's almost like we have that feeling of hanging onto a cliff where we might fall off. In both instances, it's gravity. It's just that we're either aligning or ignoring. That's the important thing. We can choose to do anything we want in life, but we do not choose the consequence. This is something you want to teach your kids too. You can teach them, we can do anything we want in life. But my dear child, my son, my daughter, we do not choose the consequence. The consequences are determined by principles. And as a dad, it's your job to teach your kids those principles so that they can have the consequences that they want and not the consequences that they don't want. So that's my thing. You want to send the message, I love you, but I'm also going to have boundaries that aren't going to break. because I want you to feel secure in that cave of life where we're all kind of feeling ourselves along in that dark wall. When you cave in if you set a boundary and say, hey, son, I don't want you to steal, but then you let them steal, it's like that wall crumbles and they don't feel as secure. If you say, hey, we need to treat people with respect, but then you let them treat other people with disrespect, it's like the wall crumbles. You want kids, their job is to push a little bit. And as a dad, we need to be strong enough to hold that boundary firmly but kindly. You can do it with kindness. So they know they can depend on you and they can learn those principles. So as much as we want to be friends with our kids, and we should have a friendly relationship, it's not all. We need to really realize that our job is to teach our kids to be successful. And the way we do that is by working on ourselves so we can become the best version of ourselves, help our kids to become the best version of themselves. And the way we do that, one of the ways is to learn the principles that are just there already, the principles that govern life, the principles that govern relationships, the principles that govern everything, and teach our children to align with those principles in a loving way. So I had a conversation with somebody that's a very smart person, and he was saying, well, how that unconditionally loving and still hold boundaries or still reinforce people in a positive way, and we're going to talk about that. And you can do both, because you can unconditionally love and still say, I don't want you to run in the street. Because it's not loving to let you run in the street, because otherwise you might have the experience of being run over by a car. You can still say, I love you unconditionally, but I don't want you to steal, because I don't want you to have the experience of going to jail later on because you decided to steal. And so that's kind of the thing I want to talk about. Let's learn the principles and teach our kids. Thanks for listening today. We'll go from there.